So as we're getting ready to install our new impeller, you just want to look the pump plate over, make sure there's not any nicks or gouges or scratches in it where it's ingested sand or foreign material, things like that. Same thing with the stainless portion of the pump housing. You want to look it over, make sure it doesn't have any grooves or gouges cut in it. This one looks really good, so should be no problem reusing this one. So now we're going to take the plastic housing. I've replaced the O-ring that came off earlier, and all we're going to do is this lip portion of the stainless body actually lines up with this part of the water pump. So we just drop that in there till it bottoms out, and it's ready to go. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to put just a little swipe of grease inside this housing and on the pump plate, just to kind of give that pump a little bit of initial lubrication on startup until the water hits it. That way we don't overheat the impeller and possibly damage it on the initial startup. It doesn't take much grease. We're going to give this just a little swipe, just enough to help give that thing a little extra lubrication until the water hits it. Matter of fact, we're going to put just a little bit on the inside of the impeller to help facilitate getting it on that input shaft a little easier. Just like that. Then we're going to go ahead and put just a little bit in the pump housing. And there again, it doesn't take much. You don't want to put a whole lot in there, just a little dab. Okay. So now we're going to install the impeller. Remember to put the keyway down, line it up with the keyway on the shaft. Just like that. Next we'll install the pump housing. As we go to install this, to orient the vanes of the impeller, you want to turn that shaft clockwise as we put just a little bit of pressure on it, and then ease that down on those dowels until it bottoms out, just like that. And there we go. Nothing to it. Next, all we gotta do is just install the bolts. Getting ready to reinstall this lower unit, and before we do, I'm gonna put just a little light coating of grease on the rubber O-ring that seals the water outlet pipe, and then we're gonna put a little bit more on the shifter shaft where it splines on. And then we're going to put just a little dab on the main input shaft where it comes out of the bottom of the motor. Just a little bit. Alright, we're ready to reinstall it now. Alrighty, I'm going to stab this final drive up in here. So, just line up the drive shaft. And as you go to slide this lower unit in, you want to line up the water pump and the little shifter shaft. Get you a bolt handy. Ease it up in there. Just wiggle it around a little bit. Once it lines up, it'll fall right into place. So I'm going to stick me a bolt in here. Hold it in place. Then we'll get the rest of the hardware attached. So I'm putting the last of our attaching bolts that holds the lower unit onto the power head on. And as we're putting these bolts on, what you want to do is take a few minutes and snug them down just a little bit at a time and kind of go around them in a little bit of a pattern. Since you got such a large casting here, you don't want to get anything in a bind, so just kind of take your time about snugging the bolts up. Do them a little bit at a time, and that way it settles the lower unit onto the power head. That way you don't risk breaking the casting. Our last piece to go on is going to be our trim tab. So you put that in place, start the bolt on it, and before you tighten the bolt, be sure that you line up your mark that you made earlier so that you get your trim tab in the right position, and just snug the bolt up. There we go. was just running this motor a little bit to make sure the water pump was working right, and I sat there and let it run for just a couple minutes, and I noticed the little bypass where the water comes squirting out so that you can see that the water pump's working like it's supposed to be. Wasn't getting no water out of it, and so I shut the motor off and I did a little more looking on it, and dirt daubers. Take a look at this. That is the bypass port right there. It's full of mud right in the end of it there. There's supposed to be water coming out of that when it's running. So I unplugged the hose coming out of the end of it. Sure enough, it's got a bunch of crud in it. Dirt dauber nest. You know, you can't never be too careful when you're checking these things out for debris and dirt daubers and things under the cowlings and the water outlets, and just any place in there there's a little hole or something they can build a nest in. Them rascals will get in there and they'll stop up all kinds of stuff. You know, I always like to pull the cowlings off these things and check up under there for dirt daubers and just any kind of debris and things like that. You know, you never know what you're going to run into on one of these when you got the cowling off of it. As a matter of fact, while I was chasing down this dirt dauber and the water pump outlet, check out what else I found. Some extra added pieces here. Check this out. There's a piece of an old pair of pliers laying down in this motor housing. Matter of fact, there's the other part of it right there. Have to do a little digging to get that out of there, but it just goes to show you just can't take it for granted that there's not anything loose floating around in that engine housing. You don't want to leave that crap in there, because man, if it sucks it up in the air intake, you know, your motor is done. So it's good advice to take that cowling off every once in a while. Check up under it for debris, dirt daubers. Check all your little water outlets, your water pump on the lower end. You see any mud in there, rinse all that stuff out, and man, it'll sure save you a lot of headache later. Alrighty guys, well, that's going to complete our water pump replacement for our Yamaha 250 Outboard. Pretty easy job to do. You know, if an old redneck like me can do it, I guarantee you can do it too. Yeah, appreciate y'all watching. Y'all have a good one.